Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Ila Manga from Breathwork-Africa, and this is Threads of Healing, Voices of Breathwork-Africa, a space for brave and beautiful conversations with extraordinary humans who are expressing the breath in powerful, inspiring, and often provocative ways. These are conversations you will not often hear, but ones that are vital if we are to be true to the essence of breath as medicine, as a catalyst, as a change agent, and a way of being in the world, beyond just the technique. So now I have the great honor of introducing you to today's guest, Ashleigh McKenzie. I met Ashleigh through her training as a breathwork practitioner with Breathwork-Africa. And we recently had the great privilege of spending a week with her in the Netherlands, where she's now based. And it was in that time that we had some really powerful conversations that really made me confront some assumptions I had been making, ideas of my own privilege, and that broadened my perspective of many aspects of social justice that I was unconscious of. And I thought it was really important to bring this conversation to a wider audience. So, Ashleigh, thank you for being here. It is so wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I feel very humbled and honored to be invited to have a conversation with you in this space.
I can't wait to get stuck into this conversation, Ashleigh. But before we do, I thought perhaps we could start by grounding ourselves and coming into our bodies and breath. And would you like to perhaps guide us into a little practice before we begin?
I'd love to. All right, so welcome everyone. I can see some of your beautiful faces and others feeling your presence here. Hi, mommy. My mom's here as well, which is lovely. I just want to invite you to maybe find a little bit of movement in your body. So maybe stretching yourself out. Something that I often need before speaking in front of people or also before breathing is to just let myself move in a way that feels completely uninhibited. And let any remnants of what might still be sitting with me from the day just sort of float away or sink down into the earth. So then perhaps you could take a moment to just orientate your space, yourself to the space that you're in. So maybe it's a space you know very well, but perhaps just looking at where you are, noticing the corners and the edges, the colors, the textures. Maybe turning behind you, giving your spine a nice twist if that's possible. Noticing what's behind you on both sides. Oh, finding a little movement in the neck, little wiggle of the jaw. And then if it feels safe for you, comfortable for you to close down your eyes, inviting you to turn your awareness inward. And perhaps we could take one collective inhale through the nose together and softly release out the mouth. And just taking a moment to notice where you feel yourself in connection to the surface beneath you. Where you perhaps feel your sitting bones grounded, parts of your legs and your feet. Notice if you might be able to soften around your belly. Perhaps also softening into the pelvic floor as much as feels safe for you. allowing a gentleness around your rib cage, softening of the chest and the upper back as your shoulders sink away from your ears. And then just taking a moment to notice your breath. Where do you feel your breath in this moment? Perhaps you feel your breath down in your belly or your lower back. Maybe more in your rib cage. Or your chest or upper back. Perhaps as you connect here, you might be able to feel your breath somewhere else in your body, your big toe, the crown of your head. Allowing one hand to land onto your belly and another onto your heart center in the middle of your chest. Seeing if you might be able to invite your breath to start from your belly where you feel your lower hand. And notice how it rises up into the space of your heart. And then how that energy grounds once more as you release your exhale. Now seeing if you might be able to extend that inhale somewhat. Finding a longer, maybe more expansive breath in. And slowing down the exhale. Noticing how life enters you as you welcome it in with the inhale. Noticing how you give life back as you exhale. Feeling how your breath connects these two intuitive centers. And invites you into a gentle presence. To witness yourself in this moment. To witness how life flows through you. Perhaps you even notice the beat of your heart. And allowing this breath to connect you with the space of your heart. that we may receive one another from this space. In this circle here this evening. Connecting with the courage of your heart. Seeing if you might be able to allow the breath to be even more expansive, filling up all sides of your heart, from the front, the back, the side. And then feeling yourself come back to that center as you slowly exhale. Perhaps even feeling the resonance of your heart reaching outside of your body. As we connect our hearts together here through the breath. When you feel ready, gently finding an expansive inhale once more. And softening out the mouth. And grounding your hands back onto your legs, maybe giving them a rub. And gently allowing light back into your eyes, bringing yourself back into the space.
Oh, Ash, thank you for that really beautiful practice. It's, I think, exactly what I needed today. So thank you so much for that. As I experience your guidance, it feels that the place from which you speak and guide, the place from which you are supporting our journey with the breath comes from a deeply embodied and aware place within you. I just like to acknowledge that. And I'd like to maybe embark on this conversation with the first question, just based on my experience of that session, around what your personal journey of the breath has been. And what is the way in which you practice it now? How does the breath support the work that you are doing in the world right now?
Starting nice and easy. So I think my journey with breathing, I guess, started when I came into this world. But really with breath work, how it began touching my life was in 2019, I think. And I was working in hospital during COVID times with people who were already very ill outside of COVID. And it was a very high stress time for me. And so my friend Taryn Zaya, who was doing a training with Breathwork-Africa, she said, this might be something supportive for you. And being a physiotherapist, so was trained as a clinical physio and working in ICU and in the rehabilitation space. And I was kind of like, breath, okay. Yeah, I work a lot with the breath. And then I did the foundation course in that time. And it very quickly became clear to me that it was everything that I needed to be able to, all I needed was my breath to be able to move through the tragic losses, the high stress, but also what we were moving through collectively as humanity at that time and the weight of that. And so that first weekend in my apartment on my own in Cape Town in Muizenberg, that was a deeply profound experience for me. And I knew immediately that I was going to do the advanced course. And through that time, I was moving through a big transition in my life, moving from South Africa to the Netherlands, which was a very hard thing for me to choose to do. I moved for love, but I really grapple with my colonial heritage. And so I was very resistant to moving to the Netherlands. And I'm so deeply grateful that I had the breath to support me in that transition and to help me open through those layers of myself that had become quite hard. And yeah, fast forward a little bit, I couldn't work as a physio here immediately. So I did my yoga teacher training and Pilates, and I started teaching movement. And once I had completed my training in breathwork, I started seeing private clients here, one-on-one sessions, both online. And then I had the great privilege to start teaching on a weekly basis classes. And I no longer call them classes. I don't like to call them classes. I just call them explorations. And so twice a week, I facilitate a breath exploration, and 3 times a week, actually, in Haarlem, where I live, and in Amsterdam. And it's a really, really, it's been a profound unfolding for me in the spaces, spiritual spaces where the difficult conversations aren't always had. And it's really created the space for me to be able to bring all of myself in my authenticity, and with all that I'm moving through. And not only to facilitate people to discover their own breath, but to find a space where it's truly safe for me to be. And so it's really sort of removed this hierarchical idea of me being a teacher. And it's a way that we explore together. And it's been so healing for me to be received in all that I am in those spaces. Yeah, and aside or alongside working as a movement practitioner, as a somatic experience practitioner, and sharing the medicine of the breath, I spend quite a lot of time on the streets of Amsterdam and all over the Netherlands. Yeah, as a part of the movement for Free Palestine and for collective liberation in general. So also fighting for the rights of people in Congo and Sudan, and trying to learn more myself because I have a lot to learn, and to create more awareness around the injustices in the world, and how we can courageously step into these spaces. And the breath has been an enormous support for me in that space as well. My own stepping into these spaces can be quite scary. And so supporting me through this space, but also supporting the activist community in a lot of the time fighting on the streets fighting for social justice, and coming back to the heart and sharing vulnerably what we're moving through together, which is ultimately a deep pain of where we are as humanity and how we keep perpetuating the same cycles.
Mm. Ash, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, I'd like to really dive into this idea of what we mean by collective liberation. But before we do, I'd like to go back to something you mentioned earlier around your feelings about your colonial heritage and what it meant for you to go back to the Netherlands, but also closer to home and I suppose closer to you in terms of your heritage and your lineage. You hold a really interesting history. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your family line and how your family line have been, well, they hold the energy of activists. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a little bit nerve-wracking with my mom on the call, so maybe you got to correct me if I'm wrong, Mum. But yeah, I come from a long line of people, men and women, who believe in social justice and equality. My grandfather, Michael McGregor Corbett, my mother's father, he was part of the Torch Commando in South Africa, which was war veterans against apartheid. And he had to eventually leave that space because he was an advocate and became a judge. And he, to my understanding and my knowledge of him as a human being, he was really my best friend as a kid. Tried to fight the system from within in the manner that he could. As Chief Justice of South Africa. And he eventually inaugurated Nelson Mandela and stayed on with Mandela for a couple of years, serving as Chief Justice. And he was a man who was quite quiet and listened and really tried to learn and understand people's perspectives. Yeah, I have a book here that I'm reading. Actually, I showed you earlier. It's by a really wonderful man called Frantz Fanon. If you haven't read any of his work, it's a really, really amazing author, revolutionary. And this book is called Black Skin, White Masks, about interracial relationships. And for me, my grandfather was investigating his privilege, what it meant to be a white man in South Africa in his position of power. And that has really inspired me to also investigate myself as a, young white woman growing up in South Africa with the privileges that I had, aware and unaware of, what that means for me and my life, but also what it means to my Black and brown-bodied colleagues. For example, when I was working in an under-resourced community, and just because I had a university degree, I was in the office being paid more, and women who'd been working in the space for 30 years were working below me, and what that means to them, and my arrogance as a 24-year-old going into that space thinking that I could teach people something, and how we could trigger each other in that space, and how much I needed to humble myself and understand what I represent in that space. And so I think that the way that my grandfather moved through life and inquired, and my parents and my grandmother as well, um, has informed the way that I try to move through life and try to keep questioning myself and understanding what my position is and how that might affect people around me. And I also come from a long line of very strong women. My great-grandmother fought for women's rights to vote in the farmlands in South Africa. And she was also a woman of service. She treated people during the Spanish flu with just a sprig of lavender around her neck for protection. My mom always says that that's why I love lavender so much. And yeah, a family who really tried to instill the values in me that we all deserve equal rights. And if I see that somebody is not being treated in a way, if I see somebody being oppressed, that I need to speak up about that. I need to be courageous. I need to be courageous enough to share my voice and to take a stance against, and maybe not so much against, but also to take a stance to create a space where we can have difficult conversations and where we can really face how we've also internalized systems of supremacy and systems of harm.
Mm. I think that's so powerful, Ashleigh, that, you know, in making your voice heard and in standing uh, for the rights of humanity meant and means that you are constantly interrogating what is still unconscious within your own being. What did you meet within yourself on this journey of confronting your privilege as a white-bodied woman? And how did you navigate what you confronted?
Well, I think it's not in the past. I think I'm still confronting and I'm still navigating very much. I think, you know, over the past 2 years, which is October 2023, is when I really stepped into the movement for free Palestine and collective liberation in general and started educating myself a little bit more. I moved through a deep, deep grief, and I have been and feel I'm still moving through grief of the person that I believed myself to be. Because I realized that even though I thought myself to be quite a conscious person, to have come from a liberal family, to have come from a space like South Africa, having moved to the Netherlands, I really realized how privileged I was to be brought up in South Africa, to be born and brought up in South Africa, to really see in front of me the reality of the world. And I feel like South Africa is a microcosm of the inequality in the world. And here in the Netherlands, it's just sort of the, you know, Europe. There's more or less quite a lot of equality in society here. But in terms of the resources that have been taken from other places in order to have this equality, there are many other places in the world, mostly in Africa, South America, and Southwest Asia, more commonly known as the Middle East. The Middle East in relation to Europe, but Southwest Asia, if we talk about it in relation to Asia. I had to grapple with how little I know, with how absolutely imperfect I am, and how defensive I used to become when somebody would confront me with something that I didn't really like to believe about myself. I just had today tea with two friends who are also a part of the movement for collective liberation here in the Netherlands. And we were just chatting about what we really like about each other. And we had quite an intense conversation. And one of us was saying to the other one, well, you know, like if you really want to look at yourself, maybe you should have not gone to that concert, because we should be boycotting that space, because they're inviting people from a colonial country that is oppressing other people to perform in this space. And the other friend could say, shit, yeah, you're right. Instead of saying, yeah, but you know what, I wanted to go and it was for a good cause. She could just sit, take a breath, and say, yeah, you're 100% right. I could have made that choice and I didn't. And I think that is one of the biggest changes that I've seen in myself. And I don't get it right all the time, but is to just humble myself to being wrong and to being called in, to stand in more integrity, and to realize how I was making choices before that really weren't standing in integrity with how I was portraying myself to be.
Well, Ash, I mean, thank you for sharing that and for your honesty. You know, as you share, it feels that what you are meeting within yourself can be potentially really activating of a spiral of shame and guilt and heaviness. But you hold what you're meeting from an interesting place within yourself. I'm interested in the place within yourself that you are holding what is being unearthed in your personal journey. Tell me about that.
Joe. Not always this calm and collected, hey. It's not always pretty. It's I think it's a space of allowing, perhaps. I think growing up as a white South African, I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And it caused me to move from a space of defensiveness, but also white saviorism, thinking that I could be the savior of the world. And that created contraction in my body. And I think I followed a really wonderful course with a woman called Dr. Rossio, called, oh, Yolene, you might need to help me here, decolonial shadow work. And it was specifically for white-bodied people. And it really just, it was held with so much love and compassion for also the fact that, you know, without our consent, we were born into systems that we have co-created as humanity, where as a white-bodied person, I've been taught that my voice is important. In many places in the world, that we're more human, still is part of the systems of harm that we see today. And to really grieve that. And that grief, I think, Ela, it's you that said in the Umoya, at Umoya Fest, to really be with your grief, to go to the depths of that grief, not only personal, but collective, is the closest place that you might find grace. And I think that the last 2 years have brought me into such a raw space of deep grief that I've been able to touch that grace within myself. Yeah, to be wrong, to continue to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a good time for a little practice. Just for that feeling to drop in a little, just from what you are feeling within yourself right now. Would you like to just take us into a very short guided practice so that can really land?
Yeah. Sure. And so with the acknowledgement that we are in a mixed space, a space of different bodies, different access to peace, different life experiences, different positions of power in society, within these systems that we live in. Perhaps taking a moment to just sit with what is alive within you now. And so some of what I have shared might bring up anger or fear or questioning, confusion. It might have touched on a space of grief within you, a space of rage within you. And noticing if you might be able to let that be okay. Noticing the sensations that you feel in your body. Noticing what might be alive within your heart. And perhaps there are also thoughts or questions arising in your mind. Seeing if you can find that grounding again through the sitting bones or your legs and your feet. And with whatever you're feeling, allow the breath to create space for that. Expanding your inhale. Maybe just letting the exhale go softly out of your mouth, allowing your inhale to be an act of receiving yourself, receiving how life force is alive within you at this moment. And your exhale to be a courageous act of surrender to what is. Let's share 3 more breaths like that. With the last exhale, maybe allowing out some sound, some movement. And gently allowing yourself to welcome the light back in through your eyes and come back to the space together.
Thank you, Ashleigh. I'd like to open up to the circle now for any reflections, questions, anything that is coming through you right now. You're welcome to just unmute, raise your hand, or put something to the chat box. What has woken up through this conversation within you? Yes, March, thanks.
Thanks, Ela. Thanks, Ash. So it probably wasn't awoken in me now as much as it was in the Netherlands when we were sitting in the coffee shop and I threw the toffee into my coffee thinking it was a lump of sugar. And we continued a very, very long, intense conversation. And one thing that you said that really just stuck with me and landed extremely profoundly was, by the nature of me being a white-bodied person, a white person, however we refer to ourselves, I was coming into a space with privilege already. And what did that mean for the people in the space with me? And I mean, I've sat with that, and I think we've been home about maybe 2 months, and I've sat with that a lot. And from your perspective, what, as a practitioner, I'm a breathwork practitioner, but also just as a human being, what does that mean for me going into any circle to create safety and respect and inclusivity and knowing that this is how I was raised. I am in a white body and I've experienced the world as a white female. And I'd love some guidance on that.
Thank you. So I definitely don't have all the answers. I think very important is the acknowledgement that we're not going to be a safe space for everybody. The very fact that I'm a white-bodied woman might not feel safe for somebody coming into my space. So I think I've been in circles before or ceremonies before where somebody has said, this is a safe space for you. How do you know? So I think just the acknowledgement that we don't know how safe we are for somebody. We don't know what their experience might be in relation. We're relational beings, but in relation to somebody who looks like me, who's grown up with my privilege, who's sitting in ultimately a position of power now in the space, facilitating. So first of all, to not assume that it's going to be safe for everybody there, and to allow, this is something that I've also learned from Hannah Kandaru of Inspired Breathwork, to allow people to decide for themselves where their safety is, how far they want to go, and where they're willing to, I don't like to say push themselves to, but to maybe also, we spoke about discerning comfort versus safety and giving that, not assuming that I could know that for anybody else. And then also dismantling the hierarchy, I guess. Really making it clear that, you know, I'm learning. I'm here in the role of facilitator, but I'm not above you. And that goes for any space. Yeah, and with as much authenticity and grace, naming what you feel is appropriate in that moment. So I think if I can give an example of space of teaching yoga asana, I lost one of my jobs teaching yoga asana for speaking about genocide, for speaking about, just becoming conscious of how we might have colonized the practice of yoga. And yeah, I definitely didn't do it right all the time, and that's okay. But to be brave enough to name things that are happening in the world that have very real effects, to name racism, and that's not necessarily going to be in every context, in every situation, in every circle, but it is important to, in the way that we facilitate, also be able to have these conversations and name genocide and name oppression, so that people coming into that space, for example, if I have a Palestinian coming into my space, it doesn't mean that I necessarily have to speak about genocide, but they know that I believe that their people deserve to exist and deserve to have sovereignty. And so that already creates a layer of inclusivity. So I think it's not necessarily about naming things in the moment all the time, but in the way that we invite people into the spaces, that they know that these are things that we think about, fight for, believe in. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
And I'm still learning very much. So I definitely get it wrong, and I definitely still have a lot to learn.
And that's why we have these conversations with each other, that we learn from each other, So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you, Ashleigh.
And one last thing, being willing to be called in. So we often talk about calling out, but being willing to be called in, to have somebody say, hey, this was unsafe for me. And to be humble enough to say, all right, let's look at that together. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Sinawo, hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be in this space. I just want to share something. As a person who in the space of gender-based violence, fighting for inequality and justice for young girls and women and men, to me, I relate with an issue that we as people, we need to honor the power of breath in the line of duty that we are currently doing, and expose our voice so that the world can hear us, so that we can heal others in terms of the breath work. To me, I reflect in terms of shifting the mindset, and also exercising each and every day the power of your breath. Like we are breathing in with the power of the universe, with the nature, including our ancestors. So we also need to invite their breath in our spaces, especially whenever we go. I understand that currently we are facing the pandemic in South Africa of gender-based violence. It's up to us to take that step and be united and speak that language of change, exchanging of our breath, and also be aligned with the spiritual awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinao. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for reminding us the power of breath in supporting us, and the breath as the voice for our healing and collective liberation. Ashleigh, is there anything that you would like to share in response to Sinao?
Yeah, just thank you for sharing and for the reminder, as Ela said. We breathe not only for ourselves or the spaces that we're in, but also with all those who have been before us, and with the nature and the trees, and to really acknowledge our environment in supporting us, our ancestors in supporting us to do this work. It's such a valuable reminder, so thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Karen. Hello,
Yeah.
Mom.
That's not Mom. Mom's Felicity.
Mom's Felicity.
Yeah, you can't see Mom, but we have the same surname, Karen.
We do, actually. We do. So this is not as much a question, but just, the synchronicity when life unfolds and you just sort of look at the screen and you think, this is so delicious. It's just such a gift. So earlier today, I was in a workshop around emotional and alchemy. And one of the presenters, who is a blind woman and wasn't always blind, she's a homeopath, she spoke about her take on alchemy being not necessarily a distilling, but a transformation of all our chaotic emotions into something more peaceful. And so when I listen to you and I hear your gentle yet firm, your invitational yet boundaried language, it just struck me that this journey, when you talk about systems of harm, through all that hurt, that at the bottom of this, we can fall into that space of grace and find the peace. And so we are peace and we come in peace. And yeah, for me, that was on two levels today, what I heard this morning. And when you spoke, I feel it. You are that. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry, my apologies. My screen is a bit weird, and I didn't see your face. Sorry, Karen. I see you now. I see you now. Okay.
I just want to say I'm not always as graceful. Sometimes I'm full of rage. And that's also a part of it, right? Is having the grace to allow yourself to feel the rage and to express it through the heart. I think that's a big part of it, is being able to express through the heart, because there's things that we quite rightly can feel this sort of, sometimes I feel the rage of Mother Earth moving through me. But how do I express that through the heart? And how do I find the grace for myself in that feeling? Yeah.
And I think, Ash, to add to that and to add to what Karen has shared as well, is that it's not an individual pursuit. Like, our holding spaces can't just be within ourselves. And I mean, I think Sinao also spoke to that, that we are held by all that we are part of. And we're held by those who have come before us, and we're held by the land, but we're also held by each other. And I think, what was so profound for me in witnessing how you weave communities together. And the holding space that you so profoundly create, it really struck me. And I think that was such a great learning and reminder for us, is that our holding spaces are around us too. And that, you know, we are able to weave them together, and we need to create the containers that hold ourselves and hold each other.
And to also, to remember that something that is profound for me every time I sit or facilitate ceremony is there's a part in each person who's moving through their own journey that touches something in me, that heals a part of me. So I'm facilitating or holding space or allowing the breath to move through me in that moment, but each person is healing a part of me and holding me. That circle holds me in such safety that I can hold the circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Masulumane, hello. Wonderful to see you here.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Woo. Ashleigh, you bring such a harmonious rhythm for collective liberation, yet so deeply rooted with many layers that you're unpacking them so beautifully. I like the fact that all this comes from your place of allowing. And Marge's question made me to go deeper, actually. How do we create safe space? Through breath work, while we collectively heal or collectively take ourselves into a place of liberation. And when you said, we don't know, only now it hit that we don't know that we are bringing that safety. And when you said that, it made me to remember that white supremacy picture that shows up even through my friends, my mentors, everybody else. It creates a certain element of fear, inferiority, doubt, unconsciously, sometimes anger, which may not be mine, which can be generational, yet transferred and surfacing in these spaces. And when you said, we don't know, I started to realize that I may think I'm safe, but when you show up in your white supremacy or as a white-skinned person, which is okay, but for me, it can show up as many layers of unhealed traumas within me. Therefore, that space of allowing, going to that space of allowing as a participant, as a willing person to flow within these weaves of breath. Therefore, I can get to where you are. Therefore, there is no safety until there is willingness. There is no safety until I acknowledge that I may think I'm okay, but I may be carrying my mom's trauma that surfaces immediately within the same space. So thank you for bringing the depth of the work that you're doing, for acknowledging such deep conversation that allow us to land in. I remember I watched a podcast, I just forget the name. They were talking about superiority and inferiority, but allowing ourselves to land in interiority, the middle. And just sitting there. Thank you. for taking me there. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Suleimani. Really appreciate your sharing, your courage, your wisdom, your honesty, your bravery. I see that we have arrived at the time to conclude. Oh, I wish that we could continue, and we will again. And I'd just like to say thank you to you, Ashleigh. Deep gratitude for being here, for all that you are, for all that you share, for all your work and your love, and for your bravery. And you were such an inspiration to me and to us. And thank you for everyone who's here and to everyone who will listen to this recording. And I just really appreciate the weaving that we are all contributing to. I deeply appreciate all of you. Ashleigh, would you like to maybe just close off with any last words or feelings or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. I feel, Suleimani, I feel deeply touched by what you shared. And really received. So thank you for your reflections and sharing in your authenticity and vulnerability. And each of you for being here, for being courageous. The fact that you're here means that you're willing to have courageous conversations and interrogate yourselves. And I really believe that this is a part of the work that we need to do to be able to create a world where all beings are liberated. Ila, it really is kind of just like mind-blowing to hear your appreciation and your praise, given the phenomenal human that you are. And I'm so deeply grateful that you have created this space to have these difficult conversations in a time where it's so deeply necessary in the spaces of breath work, of healing work. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Marge, thank you so much for the space that you hold so quietly. And the way that you're able to interrogate with me and bring such lightness and joy as well to spaces. I just feel deeply grateful for this community, for the two of you, for bringing this into my life. It's really when I feel I started to really breathe and to really live was when I met you. So thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ashleigh. And maybe just where can people find you? How can people contact you?
It's a little bit difficult. I'm busy building a website.
Okay.
I will have my website online, and maybe it will be at the beginning of next year available on the Breathwork-Africa site. I don't have any social media at the moment. I'm very not findable, but I'm flying home on Friday night, and I will be facilitating some breathwork sessions with another Breathwork-Africa facilitator in Cape Town. So we will hopefully maybe get Marge to market that for us.
Yeah, and maybe if anyone would like to contact you, they can just contact Breathwork-Africa.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. If anyone has any questions or anything that you want to share, I can also just pop my email address in here.
Good idea.
That's not it. And you can pop me a message, an email, and we can stay in contact.
Thank you, everybody. Much love to you all. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.